We'll be using the SVG element in order to visualize our data with D3. Now, what I have open in front of us is an empty HTML document. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to create an SVG element. Now, let's head to the code. And the one way that I could do that is simply go to line 10, create a new line, and open an SVG element and close it. One thing that I'll note right now is that ahead of time, I've created some really basic styles, one of them being for the ID chart, so that if I assign that to an element, it'll have this sort of creamy colored background and border. And this is really for illustrative purposes. So I'll go back to index.html, and within the opening tag, I'll type ID equals chart. Save that, head to the web page and refresh. You can see now that there's this SVG element. And if you don't have your developer window or developer console open, you should have that open at all times in this course. You can open that by pressing Command Option I on Mac or Shift Control I on Windows with the Chrome browser. If you're using another browser, you'll want to explore your menu and look for the developer console, developer tools, or something like that. So now if I head to the Elements tab of the developer console and click this magnifying glass, I'll hover over this cream colored area and click it. And that takes me to the node that represents the SVG element. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the same thing, but doing it programmatically with D3. So let's go back to the code, and I'm going to delete what I just created and head to the script tag, which is where all of my code will be placed. And just under the data variable, I'll type the following: var svg equals d3 dot select, and with parentheses, body as a string. So what I'm doing here is I'm using D3's select method to select the body tag. Now at this point in the statement, I have the body element, and that is stored within SVG. So now I can act upon the body element. So with the body element, append an SVG tag. And so now this statement has returned the SVG tag into the variable. Save that, head to the browser and refresh. We don't see anything, but that's okay. The SVG tag is here at the bottom. It has appended to the body just under the script tag, and that's all right that it's under. Okay, let's head back to the code. So now what we want to do is we want to set some of the attributes for this particular element. So on a new line, I'll indent and I'll type .attr and open and close parentheses. And so the attr or attr function allows us to set an attribute where the first argument is the attribute to set, ID, and the second argument is the value, chart. Save that, go to the browser and refresh. And now you can see that if we scroll down in the Elements tab, we have set the ID attribute to chart. There are a few other attributes that are really helpful. Let's set them now. We'll go back to the code. And what I'm going to do is ahead of the data, I'm going to create a variable called W and set it equal to 800, semicolon, because that's the end of the statement. And I'll set another variable called H, and I'll set that equal to 450 with a semicolon. I'll put my cursor right after the attr ID, and then on a new line, .attr, and we're going to set the width and set that to W. New line, .attr, and as you guessed, the height, and we'll set that to H. Semicolon at the end because we're done with our statement, and remember this is one gigantic statement. We've only broken it into lines for legibility. Save that and refresh. And now we have the SVG element as we'll be using it throughout this course. We can take a look at it in the Elements tab, and you can see that we set each of the IDs. And these IDs can be custom, just in case you want to have some sort of custom ID to put on your elements. So D3 works with the DOM using selectors. And if we take a look at the code, here we're using the select method with a selector. And when you don't have any kind of special punctuation at the beginning, it's selecting a tag. And what it does is it returns it so that you can continue to chain function calls and have this declarative style of programming. And here what we did was we essentially created programmatically an SVG element, because later we'll be accessing this rather conveniently so that we don't have to continue to select it with a selector.